let's see, we've got Nicole and Natalia online. Natalia, is anybody else said they're gonna jump on this?
I'm not sure as of yet. I didn't have a chance to discuss anyone that wanted to submit public comment as of yet. We'll just get in the queue and we'll see we'll open it up. We'll see how many people we have in the queue that would like to speak.
I don't believe there's anyone else that will join the room. So if we want to start the meeting, then we can go through the agenda.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks for that.
And just out of curiosity, Nikki, if somebody does want to join the meeting, they could actually just jump into this shared Zoom call, and then they just have to request the opportunity to speak at the appropriate time. Is that correct?
So in the agenda, what they're asked to do is either submit public comment through email ahead of the meeting, 2 hours prior, or they can call at the beginning of the meeting, and the call would go to Natalia, and they can speak during public comment. But I am seeing that we don't have on the agenda public comment or even like reordering of the agenda or any of that. So I don't know if we need to add that, Natalia.
Well, the reasoning that there's no public comment portion for non-agenda items is because for this committee specifically, what they're commenting on has to be related to the items that are on the agenda. So at those times, they would go through that process that you just explained, and they would say what item that they wanted that public comment for. At this time, we don't have any by email or by the form, and I haven't received any calls as of now. But that's the reasoning for that. But if that is something that you guys would like to add, I mean, it's up to you all if you want to do that.
Well, why don't we start with, let me open up the meeting and we can start talking about that, because I think this should follow some parliamentary format going forward. So I will bring this meeting to order as the chair at 3:02 p.m. And I will go ahead and take a quick roll call. So Trustee Cervantes, are you present?
Present.
Okay, and Terry
Andrews
is present. So we're all present and accounted for. And thanks for addressing right up front, you two, Nikki and Natalia, the mystery about why there was really no public comment part on there. I know if you get one, you'll pass it on to us during the meeting, Natalia. And in the future, maybe we do have a format that lists that public comment in the proper space right there. I know things are going to go a lot busier as we move forward. So thanks everybody for being here today. And this is sort of, in my mind, a kind of a setup meeting, and much more in your case, sort of a get to know you meeting too, a little bit more than we've been able to do at the board meeting, especially as it's relevant for what we're trying to do with the CFD committee. So I'd like to open up the conversation with you right away. And that would be, in your experience working with municipalities and financing and so on, have you had experience with community facilities districts and raising bonds and things like that?
Not district specific, but obviously issued bonds and been responsible for reporting of the issuance, but also the expenditures of the bond proceeds, but not the debt service, but certainly on the utilization of the proceeds from the sale of the bonds. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's reporting requirements that are called out specifically in whatever measure that is that the taxpayers will approve. And so that's important that we set the framework to be able to ensure that we're collecting the data and reporting it in a timely fashion.
Okay. And as we continue our conversation here, I think the method in which we do that, whether it's somebody, we've got some staff members that are good with that sort of thing, or whether we're going to get a consultant that's heavily involved in the administration of all this, these are things that I'd like to kind of start talking about now. And was your experience sort of a hands-on experience with that then?
Well, that's not necessarily specifically. I mean, I managed people that did it, so obviously I saw the reports and understood how they were, what we were required to do, and ensure that we did provide that information. So as far as actually creating the spreadsheets myself, no, but I reviewed the spreadsheets, if you will, and the reports that were generated that were fed in by the expenditures from the project or projects, and of course the timeliness of those.
And I know there's legions of companies out there that do this for a living with all
Mhm.
forms of consulting and help on this. So I know that we'll be looking at them as we go forward. Um, on the information, we might as well jump into the new business item here and to talk a little bit about the scope and duties of the CFT committee. And I wanted to start just quickly with a couple of items. I didn't want to overload us in this first meeting with all of the materials that are out there. There's a ton of stuff. But with some of the government codes that mention CFDs and bond funding and so on, and the one that's on page number 3, which is a state of California government code, talks
Mhm.
about the way that bonds are raised a little bit and how they're invested and so on. But
Mhm.
the key, and let me just real quickly kind of read this into the record and let us all hear it one more time. Except as provided in subdivision A of section 27,000, yada, yada, all governing bodies of the local agencies or persons authorized to make investment decisions on behalf of those local agencies uh, investing public funds pursuant to this chapter are trustees and therefore fiduciaries subject to the prudent investor standard. When investing, reinvesting, purchasing, acquiring, exchanging, selling, or managing public funds, the trustee shall act with care, skill, prudence, and diligence under the circumstances then prevailing, including but not limited to the general economic conditions and the anticipated needs of the agency. That a prudent person acting in a like capacity and familiarity with those matters would use if the conduct of funds of a like character and with like aims to safeguard the principal and maintain the liquidity needs of the agency. Within the limitations of this section and considering the within the limitations of this section and considering individual investments as part of an overall strategy, investments may be acquired as authorized by law. And there's other language in there that makes it sort of clear that we as fiduciaries, us being especially you and I, Rushmore, members of the board, we need to take this pretty seriously because there's a host of regulations and rules and so on that need to be carefully followed to make sure that this money is collected properly and is distributed properly. So I wanted to add the gravitas of that whole thing as we keep reading about this to what we're trying to do as a committee. We need to take it pretty seriously, and I know we all will. And there was a second page that I added on there that had to do with it was a flow chart of the legislative body and how all the folks would report and interact with the different facets of the CFD in terms of raising money and so on. And this flow chart also mimics what I had envisioned us doing with the board as well and with the people that will be on the staff. So if you look at that chart and you see legislative body at the very top, I presume that to be the board of trustees. And that over on the left side, you'll see an oversight and advisory committee, which would be us, Rushmore, and anybody that we might have in this community, this committee. And then we'd have an investment or sort of an anchor person, they call it an investment official here, supported by a whole host of other services on the bottom, which to me would be the folks at the library, the staff that is sort of running the program, making decisions, and also bringing to the board information about how we need to spend our money and timetables and so on. So I thought it served two purposes. One was to talk about the way that the money flows and the activities flow, but also on the way that we sort of report to the board. And I wanted to start out with that, Rushmore, to find out if you had any different thoughts about how that also should flow.
Well, a couple of things, and maybe Nikki can jump in as well, is that obviously through Z, the voters of Altadena have authorized a flow of money over the course of years. With this approval, then we are going to issue bonds for the capital improvement projects. Now, the determination as to the exact dollar amount that we're going to issue based on what the overall expenditure plans will be for the two capital improvement projects is one thing. The other is the timeliness of selling the bonds and the frequency of that. You don't necessarily, if it's a 2 or 3 year capital project, you don't necessarily need to sell the bonds all at once. You can do it over a period of time and be able to save on basis points on the sale over being spread out. And then lastly, I'm kind of curious, because we have this dedicated source of monies already approved by the taxpayers, talking to the bond council on, what kind of bond rating we're going to get, obviously meaning that we're going to get more bang for our buck because we actually already have a dedicated flow of money. So in as much as that the investment official, i.e. the Altina Library District staff would serve that role, there's going to be some obviously necessity to get some informed expertise on the strategy and how best to leverage this flow of money and how we can get the best bond rating, and certainly coming up with a strategy how we want to sell those bonds to have, so we're not sitting on too much cash, and that we can get a better overall admin cost. So Nikki, have you had a chance to think about that, or maybe Terry, you have?
Do you want me to speak, Terry?
Well, yeah, go ahead. I just got a couple of general thoughts. You go first, Nikki.
So I do think, one of the key duties of this standing committee is going to be review of RFP and hiring of this consultant team of people that are going to help us move this thing along. To your point, I think one of the key ones, and he's going to actually be presenting tomorrow at the board retreat, is our registered municipal advisor, who will also have that fiduciary responsibility similar to what the Board of Trustees are taking on as well. So I do think next steps for this group are going to be looking at requests for proposal that we're going to post on the website to hire not only that registered municipal advisor, but we also need to hire a consultant to do the CFD administration, as well as the bond issuance disclosure. And that can be one firm to do both of those, CFD administration and bond issuance disclosure. And in addition to that, we also need to hire bond counsel. We're currently contracted with BB&K to be our general counsel, but that does not encompass bond counsel as well. So agreed, we need some expert help in making us move forward and acquire bonds in the most responsible way that we can. But first, we got to hire that team of people to guide the work.
Sure. And do we have a sense, Terry or Nikki, the time frame that we think? I mean, obviously, I've been reviewing the RFP for, the capital project manager, but do we think in a year from now? I mean, what's the real goal based on the prior conversations prior to me getting on this board? What were your thoughts as far as when you think you're going to break ground for the goal?
Obviously, we all want that to happen as soon as possible. But again, first we have to put together this team of people to help us get the bonds cashed out. In tandem with that, we're looking at hiring some type of capital project manager. I'm gonna be meeting with the facilities committee next week to talk about moving something like that forward. Again, that would be an RFP process that would go to the board. We're hoping to get all of this in front of the Board of Trustees at their regular meeting in February. In which case we post the RFPs for 2 weeks to a month, depending on the RFP timeline, and get these people hired, I would hope by April. Then the bond issuance process, and again, this is going to be presented tomorrow during the board retreat, but it looks to me like it takes between 9 and 13 weeks. And at the same time, if we're able to hire a project coordinator or capital project manager, their job is going to be, working to collect community opinion and feedback about what the design should look like, and then laying out a realistic timeline of both building projects. My vision is that we would do them at 2 different times, potentially do Bob Lucas first, and then once that's completed, move on to the main library. But again, it's all going to depend on how soon we can hire people and gather feedback and make sure we're creating library designs that work for us and the community.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The first part of your question there, Rushmore, from me, and that is, when do we want to start? It would be good to start as quickly as we can, as we practically can, because we had in 2018 a report that talked about all the repairs the library needed, just the maintenance stuff. was about $11 million. And now, as we go back with the facilities committee and take a second look, a more sweeping look, of course, of what we need to do, it went up to $22 million or more. So just in the space of a couple of years, for all practical purposes, that estimate that we had doubled. So every day we wait, every month we wait, those costs are going to continue to rise, especially in these times when there's a lot of competition for contractors and so on. So I agree with your timeline there, Nikki. I think that's a good one. And as we look at this, again, that chart that I put out for everybody, as you look at all of those boxes on the very bottom, those are all, not literally, but those are the spaces reserved for the consultants and the other companies that we're going to need to be, providing services for us. And I mean, there's really a lot to do.
Yeah, definitely.
And in that regard, Nikki, can you one more time sort of verbalize what you gave there as a timeline a minute ago? And that is that you'd like to have these RFPs out as soon as possible. Was that right? Okay.
Right. So what we believe that like the RFP, and we're drafting them right now. We're doing research through California Special Districts Association and others for, like I said, the one will be CFD administration and bond issuance disclosure. So that would be one consultant. The second RFP would be for a registered municipal advisor. And then third for bond counsel. So all three of those, our intention is to bring that to the CFD Standing Committee at your meeting in February for review, feedback, other things like that, so that we can then take those to the full board for approval at the February meeting, which I believe is February 22nd. Oh, sorry?
What was that second category you said? There's a CFD?
The registered municipal advisor.
Okay.
So yeah, once the board approves those, then we can post them on the website, start receiving proposals from, a variety of vendors. And again, we're going to have to look at what, as we're drafting them, how long they really should sit open for people to apply. So I would think by the April meeting, we should have rated and scored and had recommendations for the board. I would think by no later than the April meeting. I can't promise March. I mean, it's been interesting talking to board president Katie Clark because, I always want to get things going as quickly as possible, but I really think the key to Terry's point earlier is that we do things properly and correctly in an open and transparent manner as much as possible. And if that means like being very diligent and taking things slowly, then that's what we need to do. But again, I would like to see all three of those, as well as potentially that capital project manager or a position RFP to the board in February so that we can get that person hired. And at the same time as the bond issuance process is happening, they're also being able to do some work, especially in terms of cost estimating. One of the things when we worked with the architectural firm ABA to do the library journal design challenge back in November is that they really highly encouraged us not to break the project into parts and do separate bond cash outs. That saves you administrative costs. And when you do, projects in like phases, it ends up costing you more. So it's really my goal that hopefully we can work with this one person to oversee both projects to get a good sense of what the true cost of both are going to be so that we only have to cash out the bonds once. And, the other thing that is working in our favor right now is how low interest rates are too. So
just as long as you're not sitting on as long as you don't sell the bonds and you're sitting on them for a couple of years or 2 or 3 years, and that's a problem too. So just have to strike the fine balance. Just sure that whatever you do sell, you can spend within that year, ideally.
Yeah.
And then there are even rules about how you can take that sitting cash and invest it too. There's a whole bunch of parameters around that. So are you, in your experience then so far, Nikki, are you thinking that you mentioned the CFD administrator and a bond consultant? I think I got that right. So the CFD administration is an ongoing thing, and there's going to be lots of reports to do every year for several years or longer as we go through this process. Are you confident that one company can handle both of those things, the ones that you've talked to so far? Or
So currently we are contracted with NBS, which I know you've met Sarah Mayers several times in the past year. NBS does do CFD administration as well as bond issuance disclosure. She did say that you can hire 2 separate firms, but many firms do both. And it would be one thing, I think, if this was like many part projects, much larger. But she's confident that we'll have several firms probably apply to do both.
Okay.
Mhm.
So is your vision then that as you put out this RFP, we're gonna get a lot of hits on that from what you?
I would assume so, yeah.
So your staff is busy, Nikki, preparing a lot of RFPs.
Yes, I am. And I appreciate you being willing to take a look at them with your experience dealing with RFPs. Rushmore?
Sure. No, I'd be happy to look at the other 3 as well as you roll those things out.
So just digging down a little bit more onto item A, which is the scope and duties of the CFD committee. What, if I could ask, I'll start with you, Rushmore, is your idea of what we should be doing and how we should be operating? What are our responsibilities, so to speak?
Well, I mean, that's, being the new kid in the block is a little challenging for me because there is the municipal facility side, which will actually gauge the actual true needs and drive the actual design. The scope of this committee will be obviously to interact with that committee and the ultimate scope of work and the projects and the timeline based on what the feedback that we receive from the capital project management firm. And based on that, that's where we would work with these entities that Nikki just went through, these 3 different contractors or service providers to initiate the activities to get to the point where we're actually selling the bonds and bring in the cash in. So I see the scope and duties of this committee basically, setting up the framework as Nikki has just outlined with these RFPs, get the people in place, and relying on, say, the bond counsel, for advice, as well as CPD administrator. Just certainly make sure that we've got everything, our ducks in a row, to ensure that when we actually do know exactly what the project is that the board wants to move forward with, along with Nikki and her staff, that then we have a timetable and we can issue the bonds and accordingly. And then based on the feedback from the contractors, then we set up the appropriate protocols for reporting. So, I mean, I see this as a interactive process throughout. It'll become a little easier for the group, this committee, once the initial bonds have been sold, and maybe it's only 1 bond issuance. Then it's just you're in report mode, or if it's a couple of bond issuances over, say, a 3-year period, then just reporting on that. But the initial ramp up work is going to be the tough part. And then thereafter is once the bonds are sold, then I see it as just merely a reporting of the actual activities associated with the construction projects. And so that's how I see a lot of work up front, and just kind of regular check-ins later on as the projects are in construction.
Okay. I see things as being sort of finance heavy for us, and maybe a little less. So I see us be a little less involved in the actual, mortar and nails and all that stuff of the building itself.
Yeah.
And what's needed. But really keeping an eye on if we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's on all of these little things that need to happen with reporting, with accountability, and so on. I looked at a larger file. I think Nikki did as well. It was actually a program by one of the California departments of funding or finance, I can't remember, but it talked a lot about the different reports and timelines and so on, and it went on to the point that you thought, boy, that's going to be a pretty overwhelming job in itself, and that's sort of what guided me in that direction.
Right.
One thing I had for you, Nikki, and I'm wondering about this, is the person that you want to get for capital project manager would be a full-time person then that would be on to take a look at this?
Well, Based on the RFP that I've put together, and I'm having people review it right now, and then planning to take that to the facilities committee next week to look at as well. We would offer them office space in the library, you know, or around the project, but I don't know that it will always be a full-time position. It will probably depend on what phase of projects that we're in. And potentially, like when they apply, they'll have whatever staff that they have, potential subcontractors that work with them to help them oversee the project. So what we'll get is a fee schedule that tells us how much we're being charged by hour, depending on who's working on what. So I don't see it as a full-time person we're hiring, but yet like more of a project management firm that we'll work with.
Okay.
That will basically be working to advocate on our behalf and oversee both projects from start to finish.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that you didn't have a new staff member lined up for this, because I'm not sure that would be necessary.
No.
Although it might turn into that at some point, but we'll know that when we see it. All right, another part to me was and I don't know what you both have heard about this, is the extent to which we need to keep our bond projects and financing separate from the regular library ledger for taxes and so on. And if that's a big item, we need to pay attention to that. My hunch is that for transparency, we probably need to set up something like that, where we've got almost a separate set of books for what's happening with the community facilities district, so that, you know, just so the public can see it and that we can keep it separate from from a regular operating income.
Yeah, I never want to commingle the funds.
Nicole, do you want to comment on that or no?
No, I think you covered it well.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
She just said that she agrees
Oh,
that it would
okay.
be a separate.
And I
I'm
think,
sorry, I haven't met Nicole yet virtually. Nicole, what is Nicole's role?
Nicole, why don't you jump on camera and introduce yourself?
We
Okay.
met in the
That's
building.
fine, I'm sorry. Now I see, now I recognize you. So, okay, there
Yeah,
you go.
that's me.
Yeah, Nicole's our administrative services manager and oversees HR and finance functions.
Got it.
She's the budget guru.
Yes. Very
and
impressive.
I think we're going to get advice from our consultants about this as we go forward, but it seems to me to be the proper thing to do, to split these things up a little bit so the public can see what's going on. All right, any other comments then about item 1, scope and duties? I know we're still trying to work our way through all this stuff, and so much will depend on what we're told by the folks that we hire. But those were my initial thoughts anyway. So we ready to move on to?
I think having those 3 RFPs go out is critical, you know, and getting them on board as quickly as possible. That'll be like I said, the biggest push for us. And then once the bonds are sold, then we transition to a different kind of role.
Okay, moving on to item B. The reason that I had this on here is I thought it was important, since we're going to be a standing committee and we're subject to the Brown Act rules and so on, and then we'll have to have parliamentary procedures. If there's just you and me voting on things, Rushmore, I don't think we need to have an odd number to break ties at least. So I put this item on there about a call for additional committee members. And I think there should be either 3 or 5 going forward. We are limited a little bit to who they are because we can only have 2 board members on this committee, the standing committee. So we can't add another one of those. But we could add a member of the public or even the staff if we wanted to going forward. So Nikki, I know you and I kind of kicked around a little bit the idea of recruiting, trying to recruit somebody or a group of people, a couple, that would be able to join this committee and help us steer it. Can you take me through your thoughts on that real quick?
Yeah, as I mentioned to Terry earlier, I looked back at the strategic planning committee that was set up in February of 2019. And what they did was do a call for members of the public by posting on the library website, as well as promoting through social media to call for people that might be interested in serving on the committee that have, you know, you would think experience or background that would be applicable to helping us make these decisions. So what I would plan to do is probably not tomorrow, but maybe on Monday, put up the posting on the website to ask people to apply. Have them send a letter of interest, their resume, and then potentially maybe even like a certification type of form like we did when we appointed Rushmore and Camila with some basic questions. And then what I was hoping to do was set another meeting date with the standing committee for later in the month, maybe the last week of January, where you two can review anyone that applied and then make, and ask whoever applied to attend. Again, they could make a statement, you could ask questions, and then make either a selection of 1 or 3 additional. I agree, it should be an odd number, so that when we have, which you guys are going to vote on a calendar, but as of right now, the February 10th meeting is when I'm hoping to have some RFPs for review, that whoever is added to this committee will be able to be in attendance at that meeting and weigh in as well. So that's what I'm proposing, is we put this call out and we'll collect all of the application materials and then present that to you at a later time this month.
And we would shoot the calendar meeting date for us would be the February 10th meeting to go ahead and start actually interviewing anybody that may have applied. Is that right?
Well, I was actually thinking it would be good for that person to already be installed on the committee so that they can weigh in on the RFPs as well.
Okay.
So what I was looking at is maybe setting up another meeting of this committee, like during the last week of January, potentially, because I was thinking we would leave it open for 2 weeks, which would run from January 11th through the 22nd. And then we could compile all of that, put together a package for you guys, probably, I would think, by that Monday, which is our regular board meeting. So maybe hold another standing committee meeting on the 20th, like a special meeting on the 28th or 29th or something like that, where you could review, we could invite anybody that applied. Sorry, go ahead.
Nikki, do we need to get the full board approval to change the configuration of this committee?
I'm not sure. It's a good question. I did notice from the strategic planning committee, which was chaired by Katie Clark at that time, that her and Jason Capel selected the additional members and then presented those to the board as the selections for the committee. So I would assume that would be the case with this one as well, but we'll double check that.
Okay, but I like the idea though. Makes perfect sense.
Hello. So 2 things. We have a public comment, just to let you all know, and then they're on hold. And then the second thing was to kind of tag into what you asked in regards to people becoming a part of the committee. Per the policies and procedures of the Board of Trustees, they would just need to present the criteria that Nikki stated. So the resume, letter of interest. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I'm doing this all through the laptop, but letter of interest and a resume, and anything else you all put in place, and then they would bring that to you all, and then you all would vote on that and then submit it, or submit those names to the full board for them to consider that person or people. So the whole board would need to vote on it.
I see.
If that makes sense.
Okay, so if that is the case, then we wouldn't get board approval for additional members, it sounds like, till February. So,
Right.
So I guess it wouldn't necessarily make sense to have a separate meeting, because we could just collect applications and then you guys could make recommendations at the February 10th. And then we take that to the full board for approval in February. Because it's not going to be possible this month.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to hurt us time-wise, because we won't have, gone down the road that far to the point that we need extra board members or extra committee members. So I'm okay with that. And that means the calendar then would be, we'd have names by the 10th of February. We talk to the board about this, and also probably clear up the procedure itself, because we can use your example, Nikki. And now I think I only heard a little bit of what Natalia said, but I think she was saying typically it works the way that she described, and that is we take this whole thing to the board. Okay.
Yeah.
And Natalia, that's in your experience, that's how it works, or?
That's actually in the policies and procedures for the Board of Trustees, for the whole Board of Trustees. If you want to check, It's in section 4, and it is paragraph 2. And it goes into details more so about how staff can participate in committees and in what capacity they can, and then the process by which the committees can ask for community members to be a part of a committee.
Yeah, and reading the report that Katie submitted for February 2019, it says, the chair and having conferred with trustee Capel is pleased to present to the board for their approval the attached slate of members. So we'll just plan on having whoever applies to attend and have you review at your February 10th meeting. And then we'll take that to the full board in February.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So the next meeting will be February the 10th.
Well, you guys
Yes.
have, I believe.
What's that?
I think it's our next agenda item.
Yeah, the calendar of meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we've cleared up item B then. We're going to, and it sounds like you, Nikki, with the help of Natalia, are actually going to put out the call for board members. Are we going to identify how many we need, or are we going to say one?
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, Terry, that's one thing we haven't determined if it's going to be 1 or is it going to be 3.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Should we leave it open, or do we, well, let's talk about that right now, Rushmore. Do you favor 3 more people? So there'd be 5 of us total, or 1 more? There'd be 3 of us total.
I'm fine with 1 more.
I kind of am too, actually, 1 more. Just because, you know, we've got to drag a couple of people along, and I didn't mean that in a disparaging way, but there's a big learning curve for us, let alone, you know,
Yes.
whoever might wind up on the board, so, on the committee.
Mhm.
So I would say
Yeah.
1, Nikki.
I agree. I think 1 would be sufficient.
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Okay. All right, so I think.
Mr. Chair, then the instruction to Nikki and the team is to prepare some notification that'll go out next week on maybe the 10th to solicit for this post. Is that correct? So it's an action we're taking.
This is on the agenda as informational. So I think if we're all in agreement that we're going to call for additional members, then we'll take care of that.
Okay.
And it will be an action item, I would think, for you guys to make a determination in February.
Perfect. Great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the next item then is calendar of meetings, and you've seen the calendar. Thanks, Natalia, for sending that to us. That shows monthly meetings, the second Wednesday of every month at 3 p.m. And if you're good with that, Rushmore, you indicated you were.
I am.
We can formalize it with a vote. The only comment I would make about this is that I do see a need to meet monthly, at least for the next half a year. But I do see a time in the future where we will start to wind down. And right now, if you look at our budget committee, it only meets 1 or 2 or 3 times, well, not 1, but 2 or 3 times a year to take care of changes in the budget and to review the new ones and so on. Even though it sounds like it should be more frequent, to me it did anyway at the beginning, the budget's got sort of slow rolling thing that don't need that much adjustment. And I think this is going to get to that stage at some time in the future.
Agree.
Okay.
It's good. I think it's good to have it on the books initially, at least through the end of the calendar year. And then thereafter, we can obviously choose not to have a meeting, but certainly have it reserved for at least through the end of the calendar year. Then we can, adjust accordingly, for next year.
I think we need to address that now in our motion. We'll make a motion, and as silly as that is, with just the 2 of us, since it's an action item, we'll just approve the calendar, but in our mind, maybe be ready to cut that back if we need to next year.
Certainly. So, I mean,
One second, guys. Natalia mentioned that we had a public comment, and I'm not sure what the comment is about. So if it was potentially about our last item, I'm wondering if we should let them comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't really hear that. So yes, let's do that.
Okay.
Okay. This is all going through the same system, so forgive me if it doesn't come on correctly. Give me a second. Hello, Mr. Crowley. Give me 1 second. Can you all hear him?
No,
No, we can't
You
hear.
all can't hear him? Okay. Let me try to figure out another way to do this, and then I'll bring it back to you guys.
Can you ask him what his comment is regarding?
Okay.
Because if it's not the meeting dates, I think we could proceed at least on that.
Sure. Well, that's, we can always come back to that because everything else is just a discussion. The only action we're going to take today is really the calendar of the meetings. That's as per the agenda. So we can, while we're waiting for Natalia to get Mr. Crowley on the line, we can maybe go to the next item.
the next item is the formation of the CFD working group. Although we haven't really, I feel like we should, since it's an action item, sort of ratify the calendar of meetings. And hope I'm going about this the right way, but I would move that we vote to approve the meeting calendar.
Okay.
And
Well, I second and or say hi. There's only two of us.
this is why we need the third person. We need one of the two.
Yeah.
I'll feel better if we do it. So all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Trustee
Aye.
Evans, aye says aye. Oh, sorry, great. And Trustee Devante says aye, so that one carries. It'll be much less awkward when we get another person on board.
Exactly.
And,
So
Natalia's gonna have him call my cell phone, so he should be calling shortly, FYI.
great.
Are you recommending we proceed, Nikki, or just wait?
I think we should wait just a minute because I'm sure he'll be calling any second now, if that's okay.
Yes.
That's fine.
Nikki, he should be calling in shortly, and his comment was on item 3A.
Oh, okay. Here he comes. Hello? Okay, I'm gonna put you on speaker and then you'll be speaking to the committee, okay? Thanks. All right, go ahead. Okay,
I'm listening to the,
can you guys hear him?
No, we can't.
Sir, for the record, can you
I'm
identify
sorry,
yourself?
if I'm cleared to speak, I'm sorry. Good afternoon, board and staff. My name is Joe Crowley, 2205 Mar Vista Avenue here in Altadena. I wanted just to make a comment or an observation on the discussion about the RFPs. I just wanted to note, in addition to what has been discussed, what I think might have been overlooked is the RFP for a bond underwriter. And that is the firm that actually interfaces with the investors, delivers the interest rates, and especially important with a credit like an inaugural CFD. So I think it's something that needs to be included in the packages, and the financing team as you're assembling the group that's going to be able to provide the lowest cost funding for this unique but extremely strong credit.
Okay, great. Joe,
Appreciate that.
Joe, this is Terry Andrews. Did you address this also at a board meeting, the last one or two?
I did. I called in. Yes, I did. I called in and made a comment at the November bond meeting, or your November committee meeting. I did.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, this is our inaugural meeting, as you may know, regarding the CFD. So we appreciate any information we can give. So thanks very much for calling in, especially as you're a local Altadena resident. That means a lot.
Yes, and I feel very strongly about the library utilizing it and the opportunity, and especially since the property tax bills will be coming down the pike, and I want to make sure mine is as low as it can possibly be. So I appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks so much, Joe.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley.
Thank you, Nikki.
Yep.
Okay. So moving on, the formation of a CFD working group. I think we've sort of talked about that as part of the conversation for a while now, but I would like to sort of, for the reporting purposes anyway, go over that one more time, what we're thinking about now. And Nikki, starting with the project manager or the project consultant, he had a different name for it actually. That would be one added member to the team. And then you also, I'm considering the team to be the CFD administration and bond consultant. That was a combined consulting position,
Mhm.
a registered municipal advisor, and then a bond counsel, which I assume is your term for the legal aspect of all this, right?
Yep.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay. And now we've just been informed that it might be wise for us to consider the services of a bond underwriter.
Which I will look into.
Okay. And are there other members of the library staff that you could see being part of the team in terms of helping this process?
I would think Nicole for sure.
Yes.
Probably myself. I plan to sit in on all these
Yeah.
meetings.
That makes sense.
You know, the Nicole and Nikki team.
Double ends.
Yep, here we go. Triple ends with Natalia too. And I would assume she'll be
Right.
present as well.
She's always ever present, isn't she?
She is. And I think depending on what it is we're looking at, potentially our facilities manager, Jonathan. We also have our assistant director, Victor Wehrberg, but I think it's going to depend on the scope of the work at the time.
Mhm.
But for sure, the three of us will always be present as part of this working group.
As we go forward with the projects, the amount of money that we'll need during these bond raising episodes is going to be dependent upon what the quotes are, of course, for the work and so on. Is there any kind of a link there that we need? That sounds like it's a facilities committee activity. Is that how you're envisioning this?
I do think that the oversight of like the building projects themselves is what the ad hoc facilities committee is meant to oversee. And they would potentially, I don't know, report back to this standing committee. I think we're going to have a conversation. I'll be talking to them next week. That ad hoc group is meeting next week to talk about how that relationship will play out as well.
Okay.
I don't know that we can have one of them attend because then it's 3 board members.
Yeah.
But we'll figure that out because I'll always sit on all the meetings, you know.
Yeah, I think you might be the common link because we have to have some sort of dialogue, even if it's informal, with the facilities committee to understand what kind of projects are coming our way. But I don't see right now a lot of need for us to be involved in that aspect of things. Okay.
And potentially that capital project manager could also be the conduit that would meet with both groups as well.
Right.
Mhm.
So you're comfortable right now in terms of the formation of the team to be putting out the RFPs for the 4, if you include the bond underwriter, the 4 sort of entities that we had talked about. Okay.
Mhm. Yep.
I think that's a good start then, actually. And can you just one more, give me your timeline on that so I can write it into the report. You're going to put the RFPs out when again?
Well, I mean, our plan is to bring them to the CFD Standing Committee on your February 10th meeting
Okay.
to review, provide feedback so that we're ready to put those in the board package and present to the board in February.
Okay.
And as long as all of them are approved, again, there could be recommendations to change, in which case one or all or whatever would have to come back to the board, depending on how that goes. But as soon as the board approves, our plan would be to post them.
Okay. And if you need help, I mean, I got involved before as a committee member with any screening that you need to do or reference checking or things like that. Rushmore, would you be okay with that for those little ancillary jobs that we might want to get into?
Yeah, I don't mind. I'm gonna make double check. Make sure I understand what you're asking. You're talking about the review process. Is that what you're asking, Terry?
Well, just if we're going to make recommendations for,
Yeah.
which is what you're trying to do, we're trying to tee that up for a board meeting to recommend a certain company. Is that right, Nikki?
Well, yeah.
First,
So
we would be recommending the RFP itself,
Okay.
you know. And then once the board approves, then we're gonna have to figure out a process to evaluate all the people that apply for each RFP.
Right.
So
And then-
the format, if you will, and so on, that's what we're trying to get done at the board meeting. Okay, gotcha. I got a little confused there.
Yeah, this is the scope of
Yeah,
work
we're
right now.
just-
Scope it, and that as far as your question, Terry, about doing the evaluation, I'm not sure as the voting member I should be part of the evaluation team. I think that that's really staff, and then the staff's recommendations are then brought to the committee and committee up to the full board.
Okay.
But obviously we'll be involved through every step of the way.
Okay.
Right.
That-
And the RFPs will outline how evaluation of the applicants would look. Each of the RFPs would say that.
Okay.
Right.
So we will keep at arm's length then when it comes to assessing the candidates, the RFP candidates that come in.
We should.
Okay, got it. We didn't, or Jason and I got involved in interviewing certain people for some of the facilities committee stuff we have, but that was an ad hoc committee. Not knowing if there's a big difference or not, but certainly we want to make sure everything that we're doing is Brown Act sanctioned for this particular committee. Okay, good. Well, that's sort of all I had. Is there any closing comments or any other items you'd like to put onto the next agenda?
Well, it seems like, well, we know that we're going to have the review of these 4 RFPs that we've been discussing in earnest. And perhaps, I don't know, for transparency, we need to have an action item either for this committee or the subsequent committee where we would actually designate by title, if you will, the CFD working group, or is that something that this can be, you know, just per our discussion? I just want to make sure that we're doing everything, you know, above board here.
Well, what I can do, and this, we should talk about this, Nikki, I plan to write a report from this meeting that would go into the board packet for the next one, so we can talk about this. And the formation of a working group, what you're saying, Rushmore, is that we simply take those 4 or 5 categories that we had and recommend that would be the external working group. And then there might be a small internal working group of Nikki and Nicole and possibly Jonathan that would start to identify some of the players, and we could expand or contract on that as needed going forward.
Right. And I would just, you know, no disrespect to the individuals by name, it should be the director or assistant director or the director of admin, things like that. And obviously we know who we're talking about, but just for purposes of identifying to, you know, for an outsider looking in, they would understand who's on this working group by their title.
Okay, that's a good comment, Rushmore. So if we talk about our internal working group, it's by title, not by name.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
And then I think another action for February as a future agenda item would be selection of an additional member of the committee as well.
Yes.
And it looks like you've got a program ready for us, Nikki, tomorrow about some of the bond funding aspects and so on. Okay. So there's.
Yeah, and that, I don't know that we've got it posted on the website yet for those that are watching on YouTube, but the PowerPoints are going to be posted today. So for members of the public that are interested, they can take a look at that as well. What will be presented to the board tomorrow.
Okay. All right, then I'll get busy with this. And if you don't mind, Nikki, when I get done with this report, I'm going to send it to you to sort of give it the once over. And are you making a report as well? Or are you going to talk about this in your report to the board coming up? Or is my report going to serve as the minutes and everything else for what's going on?
Yeah, I think it should fall under the committee report as
Okay,
part of the
yeah.
package.
okay. Natalia's going thumbs up, so she doesn't want another set of minutes to have to do, and I get that. So I'll take care of this one and get it to you for checking on it.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks so much, everybody, for your time.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Terry. Great meeting.
And have a good night. I guess we'll be talking tomorrow.
Nikki,
I guess we
Nicole,
formally adjourn.
Natalia, thank you. I move to adjourn.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.